Hello guys, I am Paul McWhorter with ExtremePreppers.com, and I'm going to talk to you today about some of the advantages and disadvantages of incorporating sheep into your homesteading environment in a sort of prepping type of way. And so a little bit of background on my property. My homestead is 10 acres. I have an organic garden on it. I have an orchard where I grow pecans and peaches and apricots primarily. I have a greenhouse where I grow year-round most of the vegetables I eat. And so I kind of got interested about 6 months ago in some sheep because on this 10 acres I have a little Kubota tractor and I'm always having to kind of mow it to keep the the brush and stuff knocked down and the cactus knocked down. And so as I'm sitting there on my little Kubota tractor, it takes me the better part of a day, probably about eight hours to mow the place down. As I'm sitting there mowing down all this wonderful lush greenery, I'm thinking, you know, why am I burning diesel to mow this down? I ought to get some sort of livestock to keep it eaten down. Initially, I was interested in goats, but my friends that have goats have told me that goats are very smart and they're very curious and they're a nuisance. They get into things, they get on things, they mess things up. It was suggested that sheep would be a much better option. Also, sheep have an advantage over cattle. Cattle are very big and they're hard to manage. You know, it's hard to get the cow to go where you want him to go. And if a cow or a bull gets upset with you, they can step on you, they can kick you, they can hurt you. And so the advantage of a sheep is it's not going to hurt you. It's like you can manage the sheep as opposed to the sheep managing you. So they're not as big of a nuisance as goats, and they are a lot easier to manage than cattle. Another advantage of a sheep is that you can actually butcher a sheep at home. If you've ever dressed out a deer, sheep is about the size of a deer, and so if you know how to dress a deer, you can dress a sheep. A cow is much too heavy and much too much of a chore for what a typical person would have at home to butcher. So sheep, advantage, you can butcher them at home. Another advantage of the sheep, as I mentioned, the sheep can keep your property trimmed down by grazing, and then that saves you having to do a lot of mowing. Another advantage is the sheep can help you build the fertility of your soil. And so I have a garden. Of course, I've got to keep the sheep out of the garden, but then in the times of the year that you're not growing, you can open it up. The sheep will go in and eat all of the debris that you have left over from your growing season. And in the process, they will help build the fertility of the soil through their poop. Also, the sheep will eat a lot of different stuff, and so like scraps that we have from the greenhouse, scraps that we have from the garden, scraps that we have from the kitchen, the vegetable matter they'll eat, and they'll take that, help the composting process along, because the sheep poop is actually a very good fertilizer. They're also an excellent source of grass-fed meat, and so having the sheep, you're starting to further enhance your food production because they're very good to eat. So basically, after 6 months of having these sheep, I've been very pleased with them. I will admit that I have butchered one sheep so far. I did not do it myself. I took it to the butcher, and so yes, Cooter went to the butcher. I will admit, I really felt bad about taking, I mean, you know, I'd bought these thinking of them as a source of meat. I tried to deliberately not get attached to them. And, you know, I always looked at them as, okay, they're going to be here. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to be, you know, they're going to have a great sheep life. And then they are going to the butcher. But I will admit, after I took Cooter to the butcher, I kind of felt bad. I remember dropping him off there, and as I was leaving, he was looking up. Well, what are you doing? Where are you going? You going to leave me here? You know, he kind of was looking at me, and so I felt really bad. So, kind of the situation that I'm in now. I don't want to eat any more of my sheep, but I'm just using them right now to have in case a scenario hits where I will need meat. I will have a small flock. Right now, like I say, I have 5 sheep, 4 females, 1 male. What my plan is that I should be having a batch of baby sheep pretty soon. You can usually get a couple of batches per year, and so I should be, with these 5 sheep, I should be producing pretty quickly. What I plan on doing, the little boy sheep, I will plan on selling on Craigslist, and then the female sheep I will keep, because you don't need, one male will service a lot of females, and so I plan on just sort of keeping the females, letting them grow, and then and then selling the baby males on Craigslist. Some of the challenges that I found so far, I found the sheep have really been very low maintenance, and I like them. They sort of create a nice ambiance. There's just something very peaceful about having grazing animals on the homestead. But just if you're thinking about them, I want to tell you what some of my challenges have been so far. Number one, and this is kind of obvious, you've got to keep them out of the garden, and they're pretty resourceful. So you have to have a pretty good fencing system to keep the sheep out of the garden. They're not stupid. They look over there and they see all that nice greenery in there, and they'll be wanting to get on your garden. So before you get your sheep, if you have a garden, you've got to have some pretty nice fencing. Second thing is that definitely you want to start, your first animal to get on a homestead would be chickens. And then if you want to add sheep to them, one of the things that you have to think about is you have to keep the sheep out of the chicken food, because first of all, chicken food is expensive, and the sheep will just absolutely devour it, because an animal like a sheep really wants protein, and if you have those little protein nuggets that you're feeding the chickens, the sheep are going to get into them. And actually, the chicken food will make your sheep sick, and the chicken food can kill your sheep. And so you've really got to keep the sheep out of the chicken food. Sheep have multiple stomachs and chew a cud, so they really need to be eating very fibrous material like grasses. And if you give them protein pellets, then that will cause them to have diarrhea and actually can kill the sheep. And so before you get your sheep, if you have chickens, you've got to figure out how you're going to manage this such that the sheep do not get in the in the chicken food. What I've done, actually, you can see that when I got the sheep back here, I had these pens set up, and to get them acclimated, I put the sheep in the pens and then put hay in there for them. After a couple of weeks, I let them out to graze the property, and then what I did was I put the chicken feed in this pen, and you can see the chickens can come in and out as they want, but the pens will pretty much keep the sheep out of the chicken food. But you got to think about that. You got to think about how you're going to keep your sheep out of your garden, and how you're going to keep your sheep out of your chicken food. The other thing that I will say that's sort of a little bit of a challenge with the sheep, these pens that you see back here, these are like cattle panels. They will work under normal circumstances. Like, let's say if you get just want to keep the sheep out of the chicken food, it works pretty well. But if the sheep really wants out of these, they will crawl underneath it and get out. And so I have been struggling a little bit with keeping my sheep where I want them. And for example, one of my sheep got a little bit of something stuck on its foot, and so I needed to pin it up to get that off. So I put some hay in here, got the sheep in the pen, and then went in to try to catch the sheep. As soon as I tried to catch the sheep just dove and went out, and then I had quite a bit of difficulty in getting that sheep confined to where I could get that can unstuck from its foot. And so I really need a better set of pins than I have. I need some sort of pins where I can actually corral them and then sort of squeeze them down to a small area, so that if I need to apply medication or treat them in some way. So right now they're kind of free-ranging, but I don't have a really good way to constrain them. The final thing, if you get sheep, you want to be really careful about not overgrazing. And the sort of worms and parasites that a sheep will get have about kind of like a 2-week gestation period. And so as the sheep is going around and pooping, you want to make sure that they have enough space that they won't be coming back to the area that they pooped in to eat again, because you want to give it about 2 weeks so that any parasites that they have that they might poop out the the eggs, that those would be dead before the sheep comes back to that area. And so if you overgraze, the sheep are going to be eating down closer to the ground, are going to be more likely to pick up those parasites and more likely to have a worm problem. And so right now I have 10 acres. I have 4 sheep. How many sheep that you can run on a given piece of property is going to depend on how good your grass is. But what people tell me is for my area, I could probably have graze 1 sheep per acre. So for my 10 acres, I could have 10 sheep without having to really worry a lot about supplemental feeding and without having to worry a lot about parasite and worms. But where you're going to get into a problem is if you're trying to put 5 sheep per acre or 10 sheep on 2 acres. There you're going to be more likely to start running into a parasite problem. So I will say that after 6 months, I am pretty satisfied with having sheep. Got a little bit of a problem with them eating the landscaping around the house. That's starting to annoy my wife, but it's one of those manageable things. It's just they're very pleasant animals. They're an easy way to start producing more meat at home. And so right now I'm going to say I like them. I will say though, very important point, I got Dorper sheep. Dorper sheep are hairless sheep, which means that you do not have to shear them. Believe me, man, you do not want to get a sheep that you're going to have to shear, because that is a huge amount of work. And there are professionals that shear, but they're not going to want to come to your house for 3 or 4 or 5 sheep. They want to go somewhere and do hundreds of sheep. And so if you have sheep that have hair, you're going to have to shear them yourself, and that is a huge, ugly job that you don't want to do. So yes, sheep are great, but if you get sheep, get the type of sheep like the Dorpers that produce excellent, delicious meat, and that you will not have to shear. So after 6 months, I'm happy with my sheep. I plan on keeping them. I plan on letting my flock grow, and I plan on having sheep as part of my homesteading infrastructure moving forward. Okay, this has been Paul McWhorter with ExtremePeppers.com. If you like the video, think about giving us a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to the channel. Give me your comments below. I'd like to know, have you had sheep? What have your experiences been? Have you done sheep and goats? What have your experiences been between sheep and goats? So would really love to hear your comments below. Paul McWhorter, ExtremePeppers.com. We will talk to you guys later.